All right, folks, welcome back. Joe Holbrook here, the Cloud Tech Guy. I wanted to go ahead and wrap up the last of the modules by covering the last section, which is essentially Section 5, Configuring Access and Security. Now, there is a couple references I've seen on other websites and blogs. For example, calling this exam the GCP Cloud Security Guru exam or something similar to that. And there is actually a good amount of security related questions around IAM, around assigning permissions, granting access to auditors, service accounts, also too defining the difference between custom and predefined roles. A lot of areas to focus on. Now let's go ahead and get right into it. The first thing I'd like to do is I just want to make sure you take some time and go to the IAM page. Read it through, get the basics, because you're going to get several questions. They're going to ask you typically about access management and the benefits of it. What does Google support? Then what you want to do is go down here to basically the concepts, or you go to documentation as well, and really take a good look at understanding how this all works. I would recommend that you understand the ways you grant access to members, and there's several ways that you could do this. Now, you also need to know the right way to do it as well. Now, I would highly recommend you take your time and know when you should use a Google group, a G Suite domain, or cloud identity. Now, cloud identity is actually another service. And if you go over here, this wasn't really put out well, but if you go to IAM, go over here to IAM and admin. And whenever that gets around to it, you want to go over to Identity Aware Proxy. And you could set up this service as well. And again, they moved it, interestingly enough. But go over here to Identity and make sure you take some time to go through each of these essentially menus. Because on the exam, you will get a couple questions asking you what menu or submenu you need to go to. Quotas. Where do you go to adjust quotas? Now, again, some quotas, right, are going to be based on the location, right, your zone. Some are global. So you need to be aware of quota types. But if you go over here, I just don't want to get distracted here. Make sure you understand too service accounts. Let me go change my project. Sorry about that. I want to go to a different project. There you go. I wanted a couple things to show you there. What I would recommend is you go in and create a couple service accounts. So go over here, and I'm telling you this for a reason. When you create a service account, expect to know this right here, okay? Furnish a new private key or enable G Suite. Basically, you need to know how to essentially set up your key management. Understand it, okay? Understand how to enable G Suite with service accounts. So one more thing to be cautious with. Okay, let's go back to roles. Now, I would recommend you take a few minutes, go through this page, because this is really good for what you're going to see on the exam. Matter of fact, on this page, you'll get at least 4 or 5 questions just on this page. So make sure you know the roles. I'm going to say it again. Make sure you know the roles in Cloud IAM and why you want to use primitive over predefined or custom. So basically, if you want to have auditors come in and set up, an audit, you don't want to, you want to set them a custom role in most cases. But again, read the question and figure out what makes sense. IAM policies. Make sure, this is actually a really good diagram. This shows you the structure, right? The hierarchy. You need to know the hierarchy. What happens if Joe Schmuckatelli in Project A gets added to an organization? Are those permissions going to be taken? You know, does the higher level permissions take over, or do the lower level permissions, right? Again, understand the structure. I won't tell you the answer. I want you to find it because you're going to get a question on that, and I want you to look it up. Okay, now, when it comes to hierarchy, here's another diagram. Get to know this diagram, right? Go over here, look at support for GCP services. Now, let's go back to the objectives. Okay. Now, we pretty much covered, you know, assigning roles basically to accounts or Google Groups. So you can do that, know why, right? Define custom IAM rules. Now go back here, right? Remember, I'm warning you, just because these are easy questions if you really know what they're asking. Custom role. You're going to tailor permissions to meet your organization. So go over here, take a minute, understand what you can and can't do and why you want to use a custom role. Basically, if none of the other predefined roles meet your needs, you create a custom role. It's very simple, right? Now, remember too that there's predefined roles, but maybe those predefined roles you don't want to basically provision for whatever reason. Now, there could be, again, different reasons to have primitive roles. Again, predefined roles, and there's also primitive roles as well, right? Now, again, Google does not really suggest now. Remember primitive, this is their original permissions. Of course, it's not granular. If you need granular roles, you don't want to use primitive roles. Like, for example, if the question is saying, hey, Joe, you need to go in and, you know, assign permissions for user A to access this this S3, this cloud storage share, right? Or this specific object file, or access these compute resources only. You don't want to use a primitive role for that because it's not granular. So again, you're going to really need to spend some time on this. I really can't do this justice in under 3 hours. And when I do develop the class for this, I'm going to have to take 3 hours to go through IAM because it's going to be heavily weighted on the exam is really what you want to know. Now let's go over to the console again. Okay, let me just go back before I forget. Okay, so we covered that. Okay, service accounts. Now again, make sure you know service accounts. One of the questions on, and I'm looking at my notes here, was that they asked about how do you set up a service account, but you want to specify that service account to access specific key sets, right? Or specific keys, right? Now, what you want to do, again, go over here, right? Go to create service account. Okay. You want to furnish a private key. Also, too, what are the key types? Make a note of that, right? So I'm spending time on this because you're going to, some of these questions you really have to go into the interface and know for this exam. So this is console and some command line heavy requirements to pass this task, but it's doable if you have the experience. Now, let's go over, look at G Cloud, and I want to cover some areas that you should take a look at. And once again, spend some time going through the console. You know, make sure you understand how to do what, how to set up what, you know, play around with it. On the exam, you're going to get several questions that are based out of this console. Now, when it comes to G Cloud and IAM, there's going to be several questions, and 2 or 3 from what I have remembered and notes so far. With G Cloud, you want to be able to do a few things with the command line, and that is basically to understand how to look at permissions on a project. In other words, what are the grantable roles and resources, permissions, so on and so on. And go through and make sure you know how to use G-Cloud to list and view, right? Now go over here, and again, make sure you look at, for example, go to G-Cloud, and the area, for example, the one I want to show you was to add, this one, to add existing IAM policy. So if you want to add a policy, you don't know the whole syntax, you don't need to know that, but you want to know add IAM policy and binding. Know initially what you want to look at in project ID, right? Understand how to view it, right, or modify, right, to get. Let's see. Now, another thing too was around migrating to cloud identity. Now, you could migrate. Let's say, for example, you're currently using a non-managed service account like Gmail. You could migrate some of that to cloud identity. Make sure you understand what cloud identity is, what is free. Now, there's two tiers basically to cloud identity. There's a free service and there's additional cost. So go over here, understand what cloud identity is. This explains how this works from an IAM perspective. And I would recommend you go through this page several times, and you can expect to get a question on, again, the free edition and the premium edition. Know why you want to use premium versus free. Again, if you need to have additional features around automation, device management, mobile device, then you need to look at premium, right? The free edition can work perfectly fine in most cases, depending on the right use case. If you're the GCP admin, right, understand, again, the controls that are there. Let's go back to the, let's see, assignment here, assignment objectives here. Okay, how do you assign a service account? Basically, right? So again, you go in to the console, go over here to IAM, go to service accounts. Let's say, for example, I want to create a service account, right? I could go in and call this test 123, give it a service account ID. Now, when a service account is provisioned, right, it's going to have an @ sign. That's going to be the service. And anytime you see gserviceaccount.com, right, that's a service account. Now you want to select the role. So let's say I want to assign App Engine, and I want to assign, for example, a service account for basically a service for service administration. Now, basically, I do that. I could also add additional roles, and then I could go over here to furnish a new role, and then I could just save it. Now, if I don't select any additional features like the G Suite or add my own keys, by default, it'll go ahead and you'll use the Google security that's built in. Now, so you can see that I have this right here, test 123. Now, what I could do is, again, I could create a key. So let's say I do want to create a key now. I go ahead and create a JSON key. Now, remember, when you have to save your keys. If you lose your key, guess what? You're out of luck. So don't lose your key. Pretty straightforward. So there's just so much more to cover from a security perspective, but again, I think I did a pretty good job. The one thing I did need to cover was logs. Now, they definitely had a few questions on logs, and let me go show you a few things. Now, when it comes to monitoring log files or setting up logging, error reporting, get to know the main use cases for StackDriver. Go over to logging. One of the questions, and I'm looking at my notes. Hold on one sec. I just want to make sure. Okay, StackDriver Logging. Basically, how do you set up accounts? Then also understand the difference between basic and premium. Now, remember, basic is perfectly fine if you're not going to manage anything with AWS. Now, StackDriver, for those that aren't familiar with it, you could, it's a hybrid cloud management. You go ahead and manage AWS and Google Cloud. If you're just using this for Google Cloud, then Premium may work just well enough for your situation. But make sure you know the real differences from a high level. And also, too, remember log files are kept in StackDriver 30 days versus 7 days. So be aware of that as well. And if you have to keep log files in StackDriver for more than 30 days, if you're using Premium or actually the free, doesn't matter. If you need to go longer than what you're allowed, you have to find a way to save those log files. And the best way to do that is to automate that and send over those log files to what? To cloud storage. All right. How are we doing on time? So I got a few minutes. Let me go to logs. So I'm in logs. Now, exports. Now, you have the ability here to create an export of the log files. You can do that several different ways. And there was, if you go back here to StackDriver Monitoring, I just want to point out one more thing before I forget. I guess this drives me crazy, this menu. There it is, to monitoring. Now, one of the things to remember, when you click on monitoring, it's going to bring you to StackDriver. So you'll need to have another account, of course, set up. It will automatically discover your projects that are in that account. It'll be tied to you'll put your email. And you can see that it brings us to StackDriver. And you can see that it lists here the project that I'm in. And if I go over here, you can see that it's showing everything from CPU usage to number of instances running. Now, one of the questions on the exam was really focused on being able to prove that you're aware of how to set up an alert. What is the most efficient way to set up an alert? Well, you want to go over to create a policy. And when you create a policy, this can alert you. Now, there's different levels. Now, it depends on if you have the free tier or the premium tier, what you can do around notifications and conditions, for example. But if you go here to add a notification, you can see that if I had advanced or premium, it would allow me to text, SMS, PagerDuty, so on and so on. I could send an email, and basically this would allow me to notify myself. But I go here, add condition. Okay, now remember, I'm doing this for a reason. So if you want to set up an alert, you want to go to StackDriver Monitoring, right? And then go over to alerting, or you go from the dashboard. And then you want to set up a new alerting policy and then add condition. And you have basically basic types and advanced types. Make sure you know what a basic type is and an advanced type. Now, that was about it around StackDriver that I have notes on or remember. Again, a few questions on StackDriver, mainly one on monitoring and 2 or 3 on logging. And let's just go back to logging here. Now, remember, you are going to log on what project level. So just be aware of that. If we go to logging, we could select the project. And it'll bring us back to where we were, right? Now, if we want, we can go ahead and create another metric. Now, one of the questions actually was asking how, or actually what would be the best way to notify you. Let's say, for example, we have a call like a get or a put, right? And let's say, okay, let's just make it easy. Let's say you go to a web page and you get that 404 error. What we could do is go in here and, put in, a specific area to monitor. And we could set up a metric to monitor for that error if we want. Go over here to log-based metrics. Again, look at user-defined metrics. Now, there's system-defined metrics and there's user-defined metrics. You go ahead and create them. You have to do that in Log Viewer. So you go over here. What this is a custom metric. So a few questions on StackDriver. The main goal to know on StackDriver is logging, how to set up a metric, how to export log files, right? You could go ahead and create what? A sync. I didn't mention that before. Know what a sync is. Create an export. Create the sync name, and then you have to set a destination. So if you want to go ahead and export that to BigQuery, Cloud Storage, or PubSub, or you go custom destination as well, whatever you want to do. So you have a couple different ways to export those log files. Well, with that said, that's about all that I had on the exam. Now, make sure you go through the objectives, go through what I just showed you. I pretty much covered in these 5 videos on YouTube that I did, and also the previous one, that's a total of 6. Pretty much 85% of the test of what you should cover. There is a few things you want to spend a little bit of time, I'm not going to go through, for example, explaining cedar blocks and stuff, or really anything like that. You should be expected to know that pretty much. But with that said, I hope everyone is successful in your exam quest. And let me know how you like the videos. Once again, I hope this is a good substitute because there's really no other training available, even on Udemy. The only one I saw was actually just copied from the Cloud Architect course and really isn't, and I doubt the guy even took the test, to be honest. I was like, because I actually took his course and I was looking at like, what the heck is this? Trying to figure out how quickly he could have got it out, and he didn't. He just copied it from the Cloud Architect. But with that said, I wish you luck on the exam, and if you don't pass the beta, or this is after, June or July of 2018, I will likely have a full course available. And I do have full courses on other platforms that are going to be a little different. Some are going to be more technical, more detailed. On Udemy, though, I don't really make it as technical and lengthy because of the fact it's just a different animal of a platform, and it's hard to be profitable with people copying your courses, basically. With that said, I wish y'all luck. Happy Googling.